Your baby is staring at the mirror, not glancing, staring, and then without warning, the face crumples, the lip trembles, full body crying erupts at the sight of their own reflection. You probably laughed the first time it happened, then felt a little guilty, then wondered what exactly is going wrong inside that tiny skull. Developmental psychologists have spent decades studying this exact moment, why infants recoil in terror from the one face that should be most familiar to them. And what they discovered doesn't just explain the mirror meltdown, it reveals something profound about how human beings learn to recognize that they exist at all. The obvious explanation is that babies simply don't recognize themselves. They see a stranger in the mirror, and strangers are scary. That makes sense on the surface. Infants do show wariness toward unfamiliar faces starting around 6 months, the classic stranger anxiety window. So maybe the mirror is just presenting them with one more unknown person, and they're responding appropriately. Except, here's the problem with that theory. Babies don't react to their reflection the same way they react to actual strangers. With a real unfamiliar person, an infant will typically look toward their caregiver for reassurance, show hesitation, maybe fuss and turn away. With a mirror, the reaction is often more intense and stranger. They reach toward it, they lean in, they stare with what researchers describe as prolonged confused engagement before the distress begins. That is not the signature of simple stranger fear. Something else is happening in that moment. In 1970, psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. published a landmark study in the journal Science that would reshape how researchers understand self-awareness across species. He developed what became known as the mirror self-recognition test, placing a mark on an animal's face while they were anesthetized, then observing whether they would touch the mark when seeing their reflection. Chimpanzees passed. Most other animals did not. When developmental psychologists adapted this test for human infants, what they found stopped the field cold. Babies under 15 months almost universally fail. They do not recognize the reflection as themselves. But here's the critical finding. They don't treat it as a normal stranger either. Brain imaging studies from the University of London's Birkbeck Baby Lab have shown that infants viewing their own reflection activate different neural patterns than when viewing another baby's face. Their brain knows something is different about this face. It just doesn't know what. Your baby isn't scared of a stranger in the mirror. They're scared of something that feels wrong, a face that moves when they move, that appears and vanishes with their own presence, that exists in a space that doesn't make sense. But here's where it gets even stranger. Because that is only part of what is happening. Researchers at the University of Portsmouth's Center for Comparative and Evolutionary Psychology have identified a phenomenon they call Contingency Detection Distress. Infants are exquisitely tuned to detect when something in the world responds perfectly to their own actions, a skill that helps them learn about cause and effect, about what they can control. The mirror creates a paradox for this system. The reflection responds with perfect contingency, every movement matched instantly, but it doesn't respond socially. It doesn't smile back warmly. It doesn't make sounds. It offers no reciprocal engagement. For your baby's developing brain, this is a violation of expectations so profound it triggers alarm. They have found something that acts like a person, moves like a person, appears where a person should be, but isn't one. Your baby is not being irrational. They are detecting an anomaly that their brain is not yet equipped to resolve. And this brings us to a study that made researchers rethink the entire timeline of infant self-awareness. The experiment that changed everything was conducted at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Leipzig. Researchers wanted to understand the exact moment when mirror fear transforms into mirror recognition, the developmental threshold where terror becomes curiosity. They tracked infants longitudinally from 12 to 24 months, combining behavioral observation with neural imaging. The setup was simple. Place the baby in front of a mirror, mark their nose with a dot of rouge while they're distracted, watch what they do. Before 18 months, the babies would touch the mirror, pat the glass, try to interact with the other baby. Some would cry, some would freeze. None touched their own nose. Then, somewhere between 18 and 24 months, something shifted. The baby would see the reflection, see the mark, and reach for their own face. Their hand would go up to their nose. In that moment, a new neural pathway had come online. The researchers called it the self-recognition threshold. Dr. Tobias Grossman, who led the study, concluded that what we witness in mirror fear is not dysfunction. It is the visible surface of an invisible construction project, the building of a self that can recognize itself. Every moment of confusion, every tearful encounter with the glass is your baby's brain laying the foundation for something that will define their entire conscious existence. You are watching a person learn that they are a person. There's one layer to this that almost no one discusses outside of developmental neuroscience journals, and it involves what mirror interactions are actually constructing in the architecture of your child's brain. Researchers at Yale's Infant Cognition Center have found that the quality and frequency of mirror exposure during the critical window between 12 and 24 months correlates with measurable differences in self-referential processing later in childhood. The neural circuits being built during those confused, sometimes frightened mirror encounters are the same circuits that will eventually enable your child to think about their own thoughts, recognize their own emotions, and understand that other people have inner experiences too. This is the foundation of what psychologists call theory of mind, the capacity that makes empathy, social reasoning, and complex relationships possible. Every time your baby stares at that reflection, trying to make sense of what they're seeing, they're not just learning about mirrors, they're wiring the infrastructure for self-awareness itself. So now I need to tell you about the warning. If your baby shows no reaction to mirrors at all, no interest, no confusion, no distress, no engagement after 12 months of age, that absence is worth mentioning to your pediatrician. It does not mean something is wrong. Some babies are simply less visually engaged, more interested in sounds or textures or movement. Every developmental pathway has variation, but researchers have identified that persistent mirror indifference can sometimes be an early marker worth tracking, particularly when combined with other signs of reduced social engagement. The brain's plasticity during this window is extraordinary. What can be supported at 14 months becomes harder to shape at 36. Early identification opens doors to early support, and early support changes trajectories. If your instinct is telling you something about your baby's engagement with their own reflection, that instinct is worth trusting. You have been studying your child's face since the moment they were born. That is not nothing. That is data. So the next time your baby bursts into tears at their own reflection, you will know what is actually happening. Their brain has detected an impossible thing, a face that follows them perfectly but doesn't feel like a person, and they are appropriately alarmed. That confusion is not a bug in their development. It is the feature that will eventually allow them to know they exist, to think about themselves, to understand that the face in the glass belongs to them. Millions of years of evolution built this moment into the human developmental sequence for a reason. Your baby is not broken. They are becoming. If this changed how you see those strange mirror encounters, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments, what was your baby's very first reaction to a mirror? Was it fear, fascination, or something you still can't quite explain? Because if you've ever watched your baby reach for something that isn't there, grasping at shadows, patting at pictures, trying to pick up images from screens, that is the next video. And the science behind what infants think images actually are will change how you understand every interaction they have with the visual world. Before.